Patricia Cornwell is a best-selling crime writer, probably most known for her series featuring her medical examiner character, Kay Scarpetta. She has won countless awards for her writing and sold more than 120 million copies worldwide. I've tracked down some of her advice and quotes about writing, so as always, let's see what we can learn from her. Number 1. Even when you're making things up, you should be telling the truth. I don't try to turn the characters into anything they don't want to be. For a little context here, this quote comes from a conversation about how she'd written a gay character back in 1994 in her novel Body Farm, and how at the time that wasn't exactly encouraged. Luckily, things have generally moved on, at least a bit since then, but I thought it was important to show that context. The character she's talking about here is Lucy Farinelli, by the way. And I really like that she's talking about who her characters are here in terms of truth. There's definitely stuff we can take away from that, whatever kind of stories we write. On the one hand, we've got the more lofty and literary reading of this, that we writers are nothing but conduits for our characters and that the truth of who they are will come out inevitably through our work. Lofty though that maybe is, I don't necessarily disagree with that. I think there's an element of truth there for sure. We only have so much control over our stories, or I feel like I do anyway. And maybe our characters come from something in our subconscious that we're not even fully aware of. And letting that process unfold authentically, I think definitely sounds valuable. The less lofty side of it maybe is that being truthful to who our characters are might just help us write better stories. Having characters with consistent behaviour that's rooted in something instead of being seemingly random and unpredictable from scene to scene, I think that helps tighten our plots. Characters are the most important part of stories in my opinion. The more accurate we can be in our portrayal of them, the more empathy they might elicit from readers, the more compelling their problems and situations might seem, and yeah, the better the plot of our book, maybe. Whether this speaks to you in either of the aforementioned ways or not at all, what I think we can take from this quote is a renewed focus on shaping great characters, and to me that's never a bad thing. Number 2, you should not be worried about labels. The poetry of what you do, the imagination of it, and the startling enlightenment of what you might present to an audience, that should be what you're worried about. I love this quote because that's the type of writer that I try to be, or the kind that I think of myself as being. I'm very much focused on the craft of writing, building characters, writing engaging twists and turns, saying something or figuring something out in my writing, or at least giving that my best shot. I'm not really as interested in what comes after. Publication, classification, figuring out what shelf my work might sit on, all that sort of thing. I know that's a bit strange for a writer, but honestly, that's the niche I've carved for myself. I've leaned into the part of writing that I like the most, and that's where I'm focusing. And that's the same for my stories. When I write them, I'm not thinking, great, I can pitch this as similar to this book, or the same genre as this series. I just want to look at the story I'm writing and make the best possible version of it, being led by why I wanted to write it in the first place. So not worrying about labels, absolutely. That speaks to me. I feel aligned with that. I'd rather focus on the story itself. However, I'm very much aware that the obvious question that arises from that is, well, what's the point of writing a story that does all of that if nobody ever reads it? It's a great point. That's perhaps the central weakness in my approach and probably where I need to focus most. Like a lot of elements of writing that I discuss on this channel, I ought to remind myself that this is not a binary A or B, it's a spectrum. Maybe considering if readers would actually be interested in the story I'm thinking of writing isn't the huge deviation from my purpose that I seem to think it is. Perhaps giving a little space to that might help me find readers and not unduly affect the work that I'm writing at all. We all have our weaknesses and blind spots, and that is definitely one of mine, and maybe it's similar for you. We can't reach the whole world by writing only what we feel most passionate about and giving no ground whatsoever, but we also can't perhaps truly engage with the subject that we're writing about if we try to cater to as wide an audience as possible. It's all about discovering where we sit on that spectrum, I suppose, and that process all starts with just putting pen to paper and getting a story finished. And if you're looking for any help doing that, I'm a freelance editor and I'd love to work with you. My service is a combination of developmental and line editing, and my approach is to help you shape up your story no matter what experience level you have, and to help you develop as a writer at the same time. Or if you want to get extra videos or custom videos from me and read some of my long form work, I do all of that on Patreon. All right, on to the next tip. Number 3, Postmortem did not deserve to be rejected by practically every major publishing house before it was accepted, but it was because it was so different people didn't know what to do with it. And I think something that's really unique is going to get passed over a lot of times, and then it gets published by some little offbeat press and takes the world by storm. This is a good follow-up from the last tip, I think, especially if you tend towards the same side of the spectrum as I do, which is the I'm going to write this the way I think it should be written and ignore everything else kind of side. It makes a lot of sense to be able to position your book as similar or comparable to things that are selling or popular or sought after. The logic there is pretty obvious. And that's how publishing works, from what little I know about it anyway. Publishers are always inclined towards something they're more confident will sell and make money. That's business. And in fact, I've been told that directly by several literary agents when they're talking about my work. However, it's not as though what's sought after is a universal and static thing. Every now and again, something entirely new and original will break through, and other comparable books will then be pulled in by the gravitational field of this comet-like new phenomenon. That can then carry the industry or the genre forward for a while, and then, the cycle repeats itself. The point I'm making here, by talking about space apparently, is that the cycle always starts with something different, a breakthrough book, a different take. Someone takes the initial risk, and then the industry becomes more receptive to certain books than before. But I think you're as likely to win the lottery as you are to be an author of a book like that. Because it's not even just about the book or your skill as an author. It's timing, it's luck, it's culture, all of that stuff aligning against the odds. For that reason, I don't think there's too much point in actively chasing something like that and trying to figure out what the next big thing will be. I think our intention as authors and how much we try to do that will end up having very little effect on our chances of making it happen, really. Apologies, I'm not trying to be defeatist or negative here. Actually, the opposite. I'm trying to say the best course of action I think any writer can take is to write their story how they feel most driven to use their passion for the story to propel it in the direction that they want. There are a lot of stories that started off with small audiences that grew and grew, as Patricia Cornwell said. I think it's that authenticity and that fire that is what can give one of those comic books the energy to break through. And if you're like me, you might not even look at staying small as a bad thing in any way. I'd love to be published by a small press. Knowing that anyone out there thinks your story is special enough to want to publish it sounds like a great deal. Number 4, I think you should always want to get better. If you feel you've gotten as good as you're ever going to get, that's sort of a depressing thought. There's always something new to learn. You don't ever want to lose that sense of wonder or curiosity to flatline, or you won't produce the music anymore. We all have weaknesses in our writing, and I very much agree with this quote. Keeping those in mind is hugely helpful, but of course, not simple. I see this in editing and in myself all the time. We often, deep down, don't want to engage with what our weaknesses are. Why would we want to gloss over all the positive, good things that a reader has to say about what we've written and instead pay the closest attention to what they didn't like? In the moment, while you're feeling that sting of weakness or failure or rejection, it can feel like something you never want to experience again. It does feel harmful, like it's directly undercutting everything you've been working to try and learn and completely sweeping your feet out from under you, especially when you felt like you'd done a good job. But given time, you start to learn that being exposed to your weaknesses is way more useful than being told what you're already doing well. We all want readers to love what we write and be unable to put it down. Knowing what exactly is stopping that from happening is actually a really positive thing because it means it's no longer a mystery. It's no longer a puzzle. There's not some secret that we can't get at. What's holding us back is this. And once we know that, we can actively engage with it to get better and to learn and to smooth it out until it's not a weakness anymore. I hate to use this certain word because I've just left my corporate job after 15 years and this would be the exact type of corpo phrasing that comes from that world, but having a weakness highlighted to you really is an opportunity. I know, try not to vomit, but it gives us the direction we need to go in to progress, and that's half the battle, if not more. From there, we just need to research, we practice, we redraft, and then we succeed, or, we write, in other words. Earlier on, I talked about a big weakness of mine being that I tend to shut out the world a bit and not take into account if anyone's actually going to be interested in my stories. That's a weakness in my outlook, for sure, but in terms of my actual on the page writing, I'd say my biggest weakness is my determination to avoid description. That, as you might imagine, obviously leads me into white room syndrome. It makes my writing feel way too sparse, all because I'm reluctant to provide a few details that I worry just might bore readers. That's something I'm working on, and knowing really is half the battle. So it could be useful now for you to think back on any feedback you've had on your writing, or even just the parts of your story you found the hardest to write, and to consider what your weakness might be. I mentioned mine, or at least the biggest one. Let me know in the comments what's yours. Hit it head on, and I think that might help you tackle it and get past it. Writers are always progressing, as Patricia Cornwell said. There's always something new to learn, and besides, we writers have no other alternative than to keep writing anyway. Quitting can't be an option. You don't become a writer, you are one. And if you really are a writer, it's like telling a songbird to shut up. You can't. If you're not sure what to watch next, here's a playlist of all the authors I've talked about. Have a look for your favourite. As always, thank you so much for watching, and happy writing.